Welcome to Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo. My name is Gabe Estel. I'm here with my co-host Dennis Levi Leach and Jonathan Getz, as well as our very special guest tonight, Steve Gorman, the host of Steve Gorman SPORTS on Fox Sports Radio and foxsportsradio.com. You can follow Steve at SGS Fox on Twitter and Instagram. And many of you know Steve as the drummer for the group Trigger Hippy, as well as the Stereophonics. And Steve spent just a couple of years with the Black Crowes. Hi, Steve.
So far, all accurate. No doubt about anything you've said.
Good deal. Well, obviously, I know you guys on your show, Steve, are pretty heavily focused on the NFL right now with the Super Bowl coming up. But obviously, we're a baseball-centric show. Are you excited for the upcoming baseball season?
Yeah, I'm always excited. I mean, I'm an Orioles fan, so I'm excited more for the Orioles. I think that I get really excited when I start to see things about spring training. It's just like Pavlovian to be like, oh my gosh. But as far as, like you said, the radio show's all football and NBA right now, and in fact, on the show generally, baseball doesn't get it's not a daily thing even during the season till after the All-Star game. So as an Orioles fan, I'm always excited. I'm paying attention to the O's. I don't really dive in to baseball and what's going on in both leagues and who's got, till midway through the season. That's when because the show just dictates a whole different sort of flow.
Of course. Yeah. Are you optimistic about the O's this year? How do you feel about them going in?
Yeah, no, I'm always optimistic. I mean, when you have a great manager and you got ownership who somehow found their checkbook, I mean, good things can happen. I don't feel like we're a slam dunk by any means, but you got to understand. I mean, the Orioles have been so far removed from the years of my childhood, just in and out greatness, that even having being like 2 years ago, getting to the ALCS, I mean, that's going to hold me over for 3 more years. So
absolutely
right.
Yeah.
Sorry how we treated you.
They're on the cusp. They've been like the last couple seasons. It's just like, I don't know, something was missing that just they didn't quite get over the finish line. But
right.
Yes, certainly. And then Chris Davis is back. So yeah, you're going to be hitting some home runs. That's for sure. Well,
yeah, I mean, they don't have the kind of staff. It's funny because I was, and then in the '90s when I lived in Atlanta, I took on the Braves. I don't think I acknowledged that the National League existed until I moved to Atlanta in 1987. And then I got there and I was like, well, I can cheer for this team. They're not in the way of the Orioles at all. It's fine. And my first spring in Atlanta was '88.
Uh-huh.
I think the Orioles the Braves started like 0-18 and the Orioles were 0-22 or something like that. There was I just remember thinking, my God, I'm like 0-40. How is this possible? But then obviously in the 90s things were really good. So it's funny. I have when people talk about pitching, all I think is, well, I had great pitchers for 10 years in Atlanta and I got 1 ring to show for it. So I'll take Buck and some good bats, and we'll take our chances. I'm fine.
Nice deal. Well, Steve, could you kind of just take us through sort of a day in the life of Steve Gorman as a radio host? Like sort of, what's the prep like? How do you guys collaborate before before the broadcast?
It's real simple. I get up at like 6 because my kids got to we get the kids up and ready for school, so it's an early start, and once they leave the house, I just cruise and look and see what's going on. I mean, I've already checked headlines and scores and all that stuff. But for the most part, between like 6 and 12, all I'm doing is very peripherally keeping up with what's going on. My show's not on until 5 Central, where I live in Nashville. So, it's not a pressing thing for me to figure out what's going on first thing in the morning. But I always just make sure if there's nothing huge and unexpected. And, like to me, it's like, I got to make sure that an all NBA all-star power forward didn't punch a member of his training staff overnight, something like that.
Blake.
So like for today, an example. So like, I mean, I literally woke up, I looked at my Twitter feed and I was like, I guess we're talking about Blake Griffin. I mean, I knew nothing was going to top that story.
You can't make that shit up.
As a bizarre thing. So, that's a meteor that landed in our front yard. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's half my show today. Great. But early afternoon, my co-host Jeffrey and my producer Brandon, we'll get into the studio anywhere from, depending on if we're in the neighborhood, what's going on, noon to 3. Everybody sort of drifts in if they got other stuff to do.
Sure.
But by 3 o'clock, the three of us are here, and we're just putting together 8 segments of radio. It's a 2-hour show. What are we going to open with? What's this? What's this? What's this? And we just talk it through, and we spend 15 minutes just setting a grid of what the show's going to be, and then if I'm going to write out a bunch of thoughts on specific things, I take an hour or so and just get all those threads out of my head so I don't forget them later. And then I usually forget them later because I never look at my notes. And then, 5 o'clock hits and we just roll.
Groovy. Good deal. Good deal. Well, keep up the good work.
Now, if you had asked me that question 2 years ago when we started, I would have said, I wake up, I immediately start to panic. I can't imagine what we're going to talk about, and then I get to the studio 5 hours before the show starts, and I exhaust myself with research and too much information, and then the show sucks.
It's got to come naturally now, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, it was great. The guy that hired us to Fox Sports Radio, he said in one of our first meetings, he goes, guys, let me just lay one thing on you. This show's going to suck for about a year, and then it's going to get good. He goes, because I know it's going to be good, and I know radio takes a long time, so just don't beat yourselves up. And I thought to myself, in 6 weeks we'll be killing it. And yeah, he was right. I mean, I think it was about 10 months in before we really found a groove where it was like, we're actually doing what we thought we would do 10 months ago. It took that long.
Excellent.
Right on. Yeah. So Steve, this is Jonathan. And the idea of mixing discussions of sports and music. Why does it work so well? Why is it so easy to mix the two?
I think it's, this might be going a little too inside or whatever, but I always, the short version is, every band I ever met, there's a couple of jocks in the band, and every team I was ever on, a couple of the guys on the team were really into music too. And there's always that sort of, there's the fan. People grow up loving records and teams. I mean, it's always about what's your favorite band, who's your teams, and that's to at least I'm 50 this year. I mean, to guys of my generation and certainly older, and definitely for a few generations after. I mean, those were huge quantifiers. I mean, if you met somebody in the first 5 minutes, what are your teams? What are your bands? You knew you were either going to continue and become friends, or this guy's the biggest jerk you ever met, based on those two things.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that there's a similarity in that you stay with those things. I mean, the first bands that you love, you might turn 16 and think they're cheesy, but when you're 40, they sound good again. You know what I mean? You hang on to the music of your childhood and the teams of your childhood. Generally speaking, you stay with them. I mean, you love music at 8 and at 28 and at 68, and you love the same teams your whole life. I think there's just those kind of threads.
Yeah.
But a little beyond that, I mean, as like so many musicians, so many great musicians were total jocks as kids. The mindset is very similar. The idea that I'm going to grab a guitar and get into a club and play in front of a bunch of strangers, even though I know I'm not very good. That's not that dissimilar from the 10, 11, 12-year-old kid who's like, I'm going to take over this basketball game because someone has to. It might as well be me. But at 9, 10, 11, and 12 years old, most people aren't saying, here's a guitar, son, go join a band. What they're saying is, here's a ball, go play on this team. But there's a lot of commonality in just the headspace of people who go on to become dudes in bands and dudes in teams. I mean, there's just as many cases of people who are in bands that have no concept of the team ideal, but for the most part, there really is a lot of similarity. And I was really surprised when I joined a band and started touring and meeting bands. I sort of assumed I'm the only guy that's really into sports I'm ever going to meet. And like I said, every band I've ever toured with or met on any level, there's at least one or two massive sports fans in every rock band I've ever been around.
Cool.
Absolutely. So, Steve, you mentioned a second ago, you listening to somebody when you were a teenager and then putting them down and then revisiting them a few years later. Can you give me an example of like somebody that you put down for a band or an artist that you put down for quite a few years and then just picked up again recently and you dig
Well,
it?
I mean, at one time in my life, my two favorite bands were Earth, Wind & Fire and Devo. I mean, that was it. Like 13, 14, 15 years old. I mean, 13 and 14, like 7th and 8th grade, I guess. I love those two bands. And then, by the time I was a senior in high school, if you put on a record by either band, I would have gone like, oh my God, that is so, 4 years ago. And then the more you get into records and the more you know about new bands and you constantly learn and you just my habit was just to drop band. If a new band came in, usually somebody got kicked to the back of the line or off the train in my head. And it was funny. Earth, Wind, and Fire was one of those bands that for some reason I just decided in my head, I bet they were really, I guess they were cheesy. That wasn't all that great. And then, 10 years later, I'm in a band, I'm playing all the time, I'm doing things, and an Earth, Wind, and Fire song comes on, I sit there and I go, holy shit, I had no idea what was really going on with this band. Like, the fact that they were, the fact that those were hits is a miracle, because the musicianship and the parts and the feel of that band is unbelievable. And actually, Devo's the same way. I thought Devo, I went through a period of time where I'm sure I would have said Devo was just shtick. It was real nerdy, brainy college guys. You put on those records right now, go ahead, start a band and try to play that shit. I defy anybody to go sound and recreate Devo. They were phenomenal. They were great players who very purposely, fashioned this whole sound that was unlike anything else. And not only the way they played together, but the way they played individually. If you watch the clip of them doing Uncontrollable Urge on the show Fridays, it's amazing. I mean, it's just flat out fantastic. They're great.
Nice.
Right on. So, I mean, speaking of like getting back into bands, I think a lot of people I've been listening to a lot of Bowie lately over the last couple of weeks, just the whole catalog. I saw you open for Bowie in 2004 as the drummer for the Stereophonics. What was that tour like?
Right. It was awesome. What gig were you at?
Kansas City at the Starlight Theater.
Yeah, no, I remember that. You know who was at that gig? Was Kirk Hammett from Metallica.
No shit.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah, he was backstage. I hadn't seen him in forever. We did dates with Metallica in '91 in Europe, and I don't think I'd ever seen him since. And I walked up and said, hey, and he was like, hey, I remember you, dude. And I was like, I remember you, dude. And we had a big isn't Bowie great moment. But yeah, that tour was phenomenal for me, because I always liked Bowie, but I never had a Bowie phase. I never had a thing where like that was my guy, even for a month, I think it was because he was so omnipresent. I had so many friends that were into him. I never felt like I had to buy a single album. That music was all around me. And so I looked when that tour came up, I was looking forward to it, but not like, it's funny. I clearly had some subconscious expectation of, this probably won't be that great, because I remember the first night of the tour watching him and being blown away. Like, holy shit, what is this? I couldn't even, like, I still can't. I couldn't get the words out to say how amazed I was. And then I'm feeling stupid because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm amazed that Bowie's great? What the fuck's wrong with me? Like, how stupid is this? And that whole month was like that. I watched his set every single night, and that's really rare. I mean, even if just the nature of touring, a lot of times you got to go somewhere. You got friends in, you got things come up. You don't actually sit through the headliner set every night if you're in the opening band. I watched as much of his set every night as I could. I saw at least the majority of every show that whole month. And the most amazing takeaway for me was that he was actually just the greatest guy. He was so completely not the iconic, ethereal David Bowie you would expect to meet. He was just a dude, And I think I posted after he died, he was just a lad. That's what I always said. Oh, he's a lad. He's one of us. He's just a guy hanging out talking about shit. He was so down to earth and so real. I mean, not down to earth like in a, I mean, he was just very genuine. Everything that came out of him, there was no pretense. And he knew he was David Bowie. He's not pretending to be anything other than he is, but he could have a conversation with absolutely anybody. He was the kind of guy, like, if he saw me, if he saw anybody, but in my case, there were several times when I'd be in the hallway after our set, and I'd be with a friend or a family member talking, catching up, and he would walk by and he would see you talking to somebody, and he would just stop. And not in a way of like, oh, I'm going to give you the thrill of your life to meet me. It was just simply, 9 times out of 10, this makes someone's night, so of course I'll talk to your friend. Oh, I mean, he would come in a way that was not at all, it was just, he'd come over and go, hey, he'd say, hey, Steve, how was it tonight? Good? And he'd go, "Hello, I'm David." And the person would go, "Holy shit," you know. And but he would just put everyone at ease, and he just handled everything with such a it's weird to say, but he was just the most graceful guy to be around. He was awesome.
Oh, yeah. You could tell in his live performances, he would share the stage with his backup singers and his dancers.
Absolutely, man.
He would want them even with him on the stage. He would want the spotlight on them.
He was all go team about everything. And I tell you, man, I mean, the amazing thing, the second night of that tour, we were in Miami, and right as our set ended, I think we did like 45 minutes a night. Right as our last downbeat, boom, thank you, Stereophonics. I walk around to the front of the kit. The five of us are standing at the front of the stage, wave. We turn, and as we walk off, a local union guy from the venue in Miami who'd climbed up to the top of the lighting rig fell.
Oh, fun.
And
wow.
It was like, and it was a really tall, arched ceiling. It was like 60 feet. Oh. This guy didn't rope himself in, and he fell, and he landed dead center of the stage, right where our singer had been standing for 45 minutes. This guy fell and hit, and he was killed instantly.
Oh, I mean,
gosh. It was like a Wes Craven film. He exploded. It was a true horror scene, right?
Jeez.
And we were just off the stage, but we just heard the noise. I thought the PA collapsed. I thought something like that happened. And we turned back and just could immediately surmise, something awful just happened. And the audience, just 3,000, 4,000 people saw it. Like, it was a horrible scene, right?
Yeah.
We go backstage. Everyone in the building's freaking out. And Bowie, when he found out what happened, he was just, of course, rattled like anybody. And it was the second night of the tour. We really hadn't met him and spent time with him. And he called everybody from his band and said, "Hey, guys, come down here." We all went to his dressing room. And we just sat around for a couple hours and just talked and just sat there and freaked out together. And then he left, and he brought in several bottles of scotch and opened them and said, "Fuck it, we're having a drink tonight. This is the worst thing that's ever happened at a show that I can remember." But after a while, he left, and he went out, and he had his tour manager. He said, where are all the local guys, like the local union loaders that one of their coworkers had died? He went and spoke with every single union person in the hall to just say, "I'm so sorry you lost your friend. This is tragic. We're going to do anything we can to help." And like he became, and everybody's like, I mean, a local union guy sitting here talking to David Bowie after this, and he was he was just there for everybody, and it was just such a genuine, phenomenal thing to observe. And he wasn't, and again, it's like, I can't say, not too many people in his position would go do that. Not too many people would even think to do that. And a lot of people would go, "Wait, those guys, that's their world. I would be intruding." He just understood how to navigate that, even a situation like that, in a way that made everybody feel just a little better for a second, and it was an amazing thing to watch.
I bet.
Yeah. Wow. Speaking of, union guys and stagehands, Levi, one of our co-hosts here, actually is works a bunch of shows in the Boulder, Denver area. So so we've got one among us.
Yeah, that's awful, man. I can't imagine that happening. Just awful.
I've never been at a gig where anything even close to that, as far as just the shifting and the, that just doesn't happen. And it was the whole thing was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like he handled it with grace, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a question, Steve. A lot of hype in the news right now, music-wise, about Guns N' Roses reuniting. Is there any bone in Steve Gorman's body that cares about Guns N' Roses reuniting?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I liked Appetite for Destruction when it came out because, I laughed at them for a year because I was like, what band has names like this? I mean, 4 of the 5 guys had these goofy nicknames.
Oh, yeah.
But after a while, suddenly you start listening. I mean, I just thought it was another band. I was like, they're like Poison or L.A. Guns, or they're just another one of these bands that, and then, you hear it enough and you start to realize, oh no, this is different. It's not stupid hard rock. It's kind of, it wasn't metal. I mean, I first just thought, it's like metal. And then I realized, no, that's actually like these guys, you could tell they were into old Aerosmith records, and you could tell they had heard like the Stooges and different all of a sudden things started connecting for me. I was like, no, this is kind of cool. I shouldn't be looking down my nose at him. And then I think that's a great record. And we talked about it a little bit on the show today. Like, we came back from a break and It's So Easy kicked in, and I was like, man, if that came out today, you'd be like, thank God somebody remembers how to play a hard rock song like that, So, but at the same time, that's it for me. I mean, I like that record, and it certainly speaks to how huge that band was. That 20 whatever, almost 30 years after that record's release, it's a big deal that they're going to go play a handful of shows together.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish Izzy was there, but that's
he's kind of the guy. He was definitely a cool thing of it. I did some. I know Slash is the only guy in the band I really have ever known at all. And I played with him a bunch in 2002 and 3 when I was living in LA, just jamming. And he's a phenomenal player. I mean, he is literally like that guy's a hurricane. He's a force of nature on that guitar. And if you walk into a room and he's playing and there's no lights on, it's like it takes about half a second to go, oh, that's Slash. He just plays like Slash. It's really something. I think he's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Steve, also on topic of, we lost another legend. We mentioned Bowie earlier, but Glenn Frey passed away a little over a week ago.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other conversations that kind of emerged from Glenn's passing is, why are the Eagles so divisive? I mean, I have friends
because they're so big. It's real simple. They're just too fucking big to make sense of.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I love Graham Parsons, and Graham Parsons is the first guy I got into that liked country music, and I never listened to country music until I was a Graham Parsons fan.
Yeah,
but the Eagles wrote, but the Eagles wrote better songs. I'm sorry, Graham Parsons was on his way to being a great songwriter. But his songs, if you take a bunch of Eagles songs and take a bunch of Graham Parsons songs and have a bunch of other artists cover them, there's going to be no question who has the better batch of tunes, who is writing better tunes. And, when someone's writing the best songs and performing the best, and their harmonies they sounded better live than Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I mean, like, people just hate to give them the props they got because they're so big. I did Colin Cowherd last week for a bit when the day after Glenn Frey died, and we were talking about it, and it just kind of, I mean, it's if you think about it like this, I don't care that they've sold 120 million records. I mean, whatever. So, a lot of crap music has sold a lot of records. But they sold 120 million records, and the next American band on the list is half that.
Yeah.
Not 75 or 90 or 100. It's 120, and then it's 60. I mean, they're just fucking huge. You know what I mean? And plus, the timing too. They went away in 1980. And that's when classic rock became a format, and they never went away. Like,
they took over FM radio even after they broke up.
Especially after they broke up, they never ever went away. And it's
that
like
tainted
it's
some
funny
people's view of them. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, imagine if the Bee Gees imagine if the Saturday Night Fever era Bee Gees had never gone away.
Yeah. Oh wow.
I mean, there'd be some fucking Bee Gees hatred out there.
Oh yeah.
What if ABBA never went away?
Yeah, they kind of created the modern reunion tour too. I mean, when they came back together in '94, I think they paved the way for other classic rock acts to get back together and have these really lucrative tours.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no one ever thought. I mean, there's no question. I mean, who ever thought a rock band would play gigs when they were in their fucking 50s? You know what I mean? Like, back in the day. But, the Beatles broke up, but, that was 8 years as a recording band, 7 years. Done. I mean, that's sort of the template. And then the Stones the Stones never stopped, really. And then, like, to think that bands, like when U2 started in 79, nobody would have thought. I mean, I remember when Achtung Baby came out in 1991. They were just over a decade into being a band people knew about. And it was like, oh, my God, they still have it.
Yeah.
And I mean, and Achtung Baby, to me at that age, I was, 25, 26, and I'd been into U2 since I was 14. And I was like, I can't believe they're still doing this. You know, it's still not something you expect
Fast
someone to
forward
do for 40 years
later. Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're kind of entering uncharted territory, you know, with people getting this age. I mean, like, you know, I mean, Black Sabbath was in Chicago 3 nights ago, and
Right.
you know, I who would have thought that as well. But anyway, for more music that's a little bit closer to Steve, what's next for Trigger Hippie? You know, is it kind of difficult to coalesce when the band is, you know, kind of, I assume people live in different places, or is everybody kind of based in Nashville?
No, we're Jones in New York, and the rest of us are here. We're making a second record right now. We're
Awesome,
just getting
cool.
it. We have all the tunes together, and we're just putting the steps together. I mean, we're not in the studio making the record. We've done all the demos. We've got the songs, and we're just figuring out schedules right now. And it's you know, by design, it's not a full-time band. It will, if it becomes a full-time band, that's going to be great, but we're not forcing it down our own throats before we go force it down someone else's throats. I mean, we've from the beginning of this thing now, which is like 5 years of doing stuff together, it was always let's just pick our moments, and when we're together, we're going to give this thing everything we have, and we're going to have a great time, and we'll take it as far as we possibly can. But, you know, everybody's got a family. Everybody's got other things they do. It's, right. You know, if everybody was 22 years old, we'd never come off the road. We'd be out playing 250 shows a year. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case. It's you know, very much by design. This is the pace we want to work at.
Cool. Okay. And Jackie's no longer involved, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, we love the record, man. Really, really outstanding work. So, yeah,
thanks.
Keep it up, man.
Oh yeah. Nick, the bass player, is it's funny. He's the principal songwriter. Like, he's the guy who, it's always been, he and I were playing together in Nashville for years, and he would just play me songs he wrote, and I was like, dude, we're starting a band. This is just too good, you know? So we will never run out of songs. He's got, you know, 25 years of songs he's never done anything with, and he still constantly writes, so it's just a matter of us taking the time to get them all recorded.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to it, man.
Hey, Steve, you were also involved in that last Warren Zevon record, weren't you?
Yeah, I did one track. I did Knocking on Heaven's Door.
Yeah, and so, like, Jim Keltner, I thought, played drums on the whole thing, but it turns out you ended up playing on that track. How'd they choose you instead of Jim Keltner for that track?
It was totally unexpected on everybody's part. I was doing a couple sessions for Billy Bob Thornton. He was making a record.
Okay. Yeah.
And he had a studio. He bought his house from Slash, and so there was a studio in it. And Slash's engineer who built the studio was still working with Billy Bob there, and that guy had worked with the Black Crowes on a record we made that never came out called Tall. Yep. So we had been friends ever since. This guy Jim Mitchell. And Jim called me when I moved to L.A., and he said, "Oh, I'm working with Billy Bob. We're going to go in the studio. Would you want to come and play some tracks?" And I said, "Sure." So I went over for a few days. It was during the 2002 World Series, Giants, Angels. And so for that week, it was great. I'd go to Billy Bob's house in Beverly Hills. It was not a shitty house. And and he and I would watch the baseball game together. And then when the game ended, we'd go downstairs and just track tunes with his band. And the last night that I was there, we were tracking, and it was like midnight, and we'd finished, and I don't remember how many songs I did. It was just all told 4 or 5, I think. And it was like midnight, and we're like wrapping up, and the door opens, and Warren Zevon walks in.
Wow!
And he and Billy Bob were buddies for years. And I just like fell out of my chair. I'm a giant Zevon fan, and he had announced already like 6 months earlier that he was terminally ill, and I immediately had this thought of, that's Warren Zevon, and he's dying. I mean, it was really bittersweet instantly to meet him, and then to know that he was terminally ill. And he came in and he sat down, and everyone's just sort of circled around him, and we're all, you know, nice to meet you, what's going on, what's happening? And Billy had invited him over, but didn't know if he was going to turn up or not. And Warren goes, well, he goes, I went to see Dylan last night, and I don't remember where Bob had played, but he'd gone to see him in L.A., and he goes, yeah. He goes, shit, man, you know you're dying when Bob Dylan starts doing your songs. And And we're all laughing, and he goes, he did 4 of my fucking songs. I mean, fuck. He goes, I mean, I'm really dying. You know, he was really funny, and
God bless him.
And everything was very gallows humor. I mean, he was just constantly. And I remember he said they got me on this new pill called Zofram or something like that. And I remember I said, it's called Off Ramp. God damn, that's morbid. And he thought that was hilarious. Like he really, you know. So right away, like I was cool because I was laughing with him about the fact he was going to die, as bizarre as that sounds. But that was him, you know, that was his thing. And so he was talking about Dylan, and he goes, I mean, I didn't recognize the songs. He's mumbling, and my son goes, oh, Dad, that's this one, but I didn't know. But anyway, it was nice. And he goes, but I was thinking, since this is my last record, he had already done like all the other tracks for the record. And he goes, I think I should do a Dylan tune. And one of the guys in the room goes, I guess it's got to be Knocking on Heaven's Door. And everybody laughed. And he goes, well, actually, yeah, I think that's the one to do.
Wow.
And there was like this pause, literally, and everyone just stood up and walked into the room, like, to go to our instruments. Like, okay, it was this instinctive, before anyone changes their mind, let's go do this right fucking now. And everybody went in, and I remember Tommy Shaw was there, the guy from Styx, of all people, was on it. And John Waite, the singer from the Babies, and
every time
it was just like all these disparate guys hanging out, and and a few other guys that you wouldn't know. But we walked in, and it was like, okay, what's the intro? And it was like, okay, start verse. It's verse chorus, solo, chorus out, right? Is that cool for everybody? And everybody goes, yeah. And we played it once. I mean, I counted it in, and it started, and we played that song one time, and Warren sang it live, and he was, you know, if you listen to it, I mean, he really was, you know, he was having trouble keeping his full breath, and he's sitting in the booth, and where I was sitting, I could see him through the glass, and I watched him sing that song, and like hearing his voice in my headphones was. I mean, I have goosebumps right now talking about it. It's unbelievable, and towards the end, as it's fading out, he was kind of screaming. He kept going, "Open up the gates, open the gates for me!" And he was singing like that, and wheezing, and he was like sweating. He was really throwing everything he had at it, and that we played it forever. It's a fade out on the record, but it probably went for 4 more minutes, and. Wow. And when it ended, I mean, I was just sitting there like, I wasn't crying, but I easily could have. You know what I mean? It wasn't appropriate in the moment, but I remember sitting there thinking, it was just one of the few moments in life where, as something's happening, you're going, this is indescribable, and it's inconceivable that this is happening. And then we listened back once, and he goes, well, why don't you guys go sing some backups and let's get out of here. And then we all went in and sang the backup track once and got a rough mix and burned some CDs so everybody could take it home with them. And that was it. It was like 3 a.m, and I was driving home listening to it going, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah. Wow. That's surreal.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw a quick baseball question in. Do you think the South could support another baseball team like Nashville, New Orleans, or Charlotte?
I don't think Nashville could, although a lot of people in this town would disagree with me.
They got a AAA team, right?
Yeah, the Nashville Sounds, and they got a new stadium. It just had its first year, which is cool, and it's a boom town like crazy. I mean, Nashville's just absolutely on fire.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I've never thought about it for more than 5 seconds because I just always have an immediate, no, that's just too much. There's not 81 games worth of people here.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I could be wrong. New Orleans, I don't know. I don't think they need more teams. I mean, myself, I think every league in the country, I think every sports league in America should contract a few. Let's get rid of some of these guys.
Tampa Bay can go, definitely.
Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if a team is thinking of moving, or if Major League Baseball is going to expand at all. I know Nashville's going to make a play for it because it's just what Nashville does these days. But I don't think it would. I just can't imagine people staying with a team. That's an awful lot of people to get onto a new thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, football's one thing. That's only 8 games a year. Baseball, 81.
Yeah, well, and in Tennessee, football is football. It's Tennessee. I mean, it's funny. I'm an hour from the state line of Kentucky, and if you go to Kentucky and take the 10 best high school football teams in the state of Kentucky and bring them down here, they're going to get absolutely destroyed by the best 10 teams in Tennessee. And then conversely, basketball, you just cross that state line, and it's like a whole different planet for those two sports. Kentucky's all about hoops, and Tennessee's all about football.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And, speaking of state lines, I live right here on the state line in Kansas City, and we're known for our barbecue here. I got one of the greatest joints just down the street. You've probably eaten at a few joints across the U.S. Who's got the best barbecue?
I certainly have. I've had a lot of barbecue. In fact, my buddy Chris Porter, he's a comedian. Do you guys know him? Who he is?
I know the name.
Yeah, I've heard
he's from he's from Kansas City.
Okay.
And his dad used to bring out a ton of stuff when the Crows would play there. I don't know the name of his restaurant, but he's got a place in Kansas City, and he makes great shit. But I've never been to his restaurant, so I couldn't tell. I thought I was about to have a recommendation, and I just realized I have no idea what the place is called.
So, Steve, are you more of a Memphis barbecue, Texas barbecue, Kansas City barbecue?
I'm down with like the like pulled pork type of barbecue, like North Carolina style. Like that's the stuff I first go to, but I like all of it. I mean, everyone's like, "What do you prefer?" I'm like, I don't care. I go everywhere. I eat whatever they got.
It's all kind of different in every region.
Yeah. Oh, sure, absolutely. I like I'm equal opportunity. If it's good barbecue, it's good barbecue. I don't care if it's Texas or Kansas City. I get that it's regional pride, but I don't give a shit. It's all good to me.
Right on. Good deal. Absolutely. Well, Steve, our last question for you here, man, we've asked this of some other guests that we've had on the show. So Steve Gorman's first big league at bat, what's your walk-up song?
I used to ask that to all my guests when it was a local show. That was one of my questions.
Jeez, I swear I didn't know that. Anyway.
No, I did, but that's funny because you're saying that. I'm like, shit, I don't know what the answer is. I do know this. Well, last year, Jeffrey, my cousin, my co-host, and I played in a charity softball event here in Nashville, and I played "Bring It On Home," Led Zeppelin.
Oh, nice.
Makes sense. Gets people going.
Oh yeah.
My cousin picked "Morning Has Broken" by Cat Stevens because he said he wants to feel calm and centered when he takes the first pitch. And of course, he went 3 for 3 with like 2 jacks and a triple. So what do I know? But when you're at a charity softball event and they introduce a guy and you hear Cat Stevens come over the PA, it's the reaction from the crowd's pretty priceless.
Oh, I can imagine.
Right on.
So I'll stick with that. What did I say? Yeah, Zeppelin, Bring It On Home.
Zeppelin, Bring It On Home. Good deal.
Nice.
Well, excellent. Well, to remind everybody, you can catch Steve on Steve Gorman Sports on Fox Sports Radio and foxsportsradio.com. And you can follow Steve on Twitter and Instagram at SGSFox. So, Steve, thank you so much for talking to us, man. We really appreciate this and keep up the great work. And I think I speak for all three of us here, and we weren't certainly going to belabor this tonight as well, but all three of us grew up, huge Crows fans. So thank you for all your contributions there, man.
Yeah, right on, man. I'm glad that what we did, that we were just fucking around having fun. I'm glad it worked for you guys.
Right. Yeah. No, it meant a lot to us. So thank you so much.
No one was ever more surprised than we were that it worked. Trust me.
Right on.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you,
Thanks,
Steve. Have a good night. Okay. Take it easy, buddy.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Later. I'd like to thank Steve Gorman for that wonderful interview. Everybody should check out Steve's show, Steve Gorman Sports, on foxsportsradio.com. And also you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. That's us at RockinChew. That's in as in Napalm Death and Natalie Merchant, a double bill I'd love to see. And please check us out on Facebook as well. Like us, tell all your friends, and you can explore everything in the Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo universe at rockchew.com, where you can find previous episodes, music recommendations, and all kinds of cool stuff about baseball and rock and roll.
And you can sign up for our newsletter that we're going to be putting out.
And we're working on a newsletter, newsletter.
So you can give us your email, and we won't spam you or anything.
Absolutely not. So yeah, lots of good stuff coming down the pipe with Rock and Roll Shin-Soo Choo. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you later.
Peace.